Morning to everyone, dear Minister Franco, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Let me welcome you today to our high-level international conference on financing infrastructure for the recovery, the role of public-private cooperation to ensure a long-term sustainable growth. In this year of the Italian G20 presidency, Cassa, Depositi e Prestiti has been working leading the G20 Long-Term Investors Club to contribute in a concrete way to the G20 infrastructure agenda. We believe, in fact, that quality and sustainable infrastructure has a profound impact on the global economy. The world engine is starting to move again. The IMF World Economic Outlook in its last update forecast a sound recovery of 6% at global level in 2021. Against this backdrop, as recognized by the IMF itself, quality and sustainable infrastructure investments are crucial to ensure a steady and long-term recovery, while at the same time boosting the energy transition and carbon neutrality targets that many countries are setting as national priority policies. The World Bank has calculated that for every dollar invested in resilient infrastructure, $4 in benefits are generated. On top, investment in infrastructure also triggers an overall increase in productivity. Despite the general recognition of the importance of infrastructure for long-term growth, in the last decade, private involvement in infrastructure has experienced a steady decline, reaching a minimum low in 2020 because of the pandemic. Private investment, though, are crucial to bridge the increasing investment gap, which the Global Infrastructure Hub estimates at an average of $600 billion per year until 2040. They are even more important in the aftermath of the COVID-19 crisis to support public spending, constrained because of large stimulus plans that have increased national public debts. However, private investors still consider infrastructure investments as with high risk and low return rate. In Europe, we are being offered a great opportunity to overcome these difficulties in financing infrastructure. And the opportunity is the Next Generation EU plan. Since the very beginning, the spirit of this 750 billion euros initiative was aimed at strengthening our economies by providing financial backup to crucial projects, such as infrastructural ones, with a clear constraint in the amount of resources that must be allocated between green economy 37% and digitalization 20%. Italy will be the first recipient of Next Generation EU by receiving approximately 205 billion euros to finance its National Recovery and Resilience Plan. And on top of that, 30 billion euros will be added through national resources. These funds represent a strong stimulus to face last year's economic downturn with a sound fiscal framework and their national economic strategies. This process would help credible and predictable projects pipelines and improve bankability issues to bridge gaps between national planning priorities and private investors' needs, while also aggregate projects and mitigate investment risk and exploit economies of scale in both management and planning. All these solutions have come up in months of intense dialogue, a formidable tool to build trust and confidence among stakeholders. Cooperation is crucial among G20 members to establish a stable and friendly investment environment, reduce market fragmentation, and promote a level playing field in the infrastructure financial markets. This is why we count on next year's second G20 Infrastructure Investors Dialogue to be replicated. also further on and become a permanent setting for discussions as much as we hope that conferences as today's will inform us and guide our actions. Dialogue, in fact, could also turn into effective and operational cooperation initiatives shared by the willing long-term investor of G20 countries, blending private and public resources to de-risk investment by virtue of the possible attraction of private flows and boosting quality infrastructure investments. Distinguished guests, to conclude, the challenges that lie ahead are complex and require cooperation at international level to be tackled. Economic recovery, environmental protection, and climate neutrality remind us that we live in an interconnected world where G20 countries must share responsibilities for the world's well-being. I do hope that today's conference will be fruitful and concrete actions can be individuated to foster global investments in infrastructure and to help achieve a sustainable and long-term economic recovery. I wish everyone a great and an interesting conference. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tempini. Cassa Depositi's efforts in long-term investment are indeed encouraging and essential. I would now like to invite Werner Hoyer, President of the G20 Long-Term Investors Club and European Investment Bank, to take the stage. President Hoyer.
Grazie tante. Honorable Minister Franco, dear Daniele, dear colleagues, friends, it's an enormous pleasure to be here with you in person in Rome this morning. And I also greet those colleagues who cannot make it to Rome today. You are missing something, and I really hope that when we tell the stories about this meeting in Rome, you will be encouraged to find whatever way possible to meet with us next time in person. Let me begin by thanking our hosts at Cassa, Depositi e Prestiti, both Chairman Giovanni Gorno Tempini, as well as CEO Darius Canapieco, of course a dear friend and former colleague, highly estimated at EIB, for assembling such a fine program and distinguished selection of speakers, as well as our colleagues from Think 20 and B20, and of course our media partner, RAI. The Long-Term Investors Club brings together the leading financial institutions with a public mandate from the world's largest economies. Our aim is to promote the role of long-term finance in driving economic development and sustainable growth around the world. In this configuration, our members can actively connect and share valuable knowledge and insights. And in partnership with the G20 and other relevant multilateral formats, we look to provide expert insight, thought leadership, and best practice. The G20 agenda is based on the priorities people, planet, prosperity. It encompasses the wide range of issues at hand, concerns about inequality, environmental degradation, long-term growth prospects, as we are all supporting the recovery from the pandemic. Rarely has global policy coordination been more important than now. Rarely has expert insight, thought leadership, and best practice been in such a high demand to tackle climate change, promote public health, and digital transformation. In my view, there are three related strands for success: innovation, development, and partnership. If this crisis has shown us one thing, it is that we will not achieve our climate targets with current technologies. Despite massive lockdowns, carbon emissions have dropped by less than 7% in 2020. Less than 7%. If we are to achieve our climate targets, we will need a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions at that very same magnitude every single year for the next decade. We need to step up our ambition. In Africa alone, our engineers expect that energy demand will increase five-fold in the coming 2 decades. If we allow this demand to be addressed with coal and gas-fired power plants, as is the case today, our climate ambitions will literally go up in smoke. And I'm very happy that the Chinese leader has announced this year in the General Assembly of the United Nations that China will stop exporting coal power plants to Africa. That's a big step forward, encouraging and challenging all of us. New disruptive technologies need to emerge, grow to scale, and become competitive quickly. We cannot wait for decades of marginal improvements and gradual cost reduction. We simply don't have the time. This is also why we have to support the adoption of top-notch technological solutions in developing countries. We need to begin to think global. Now, what will need to happen? I think we need a global public-private partnership for the recovery leading to net zero. We see liquidity in markets of a magnitude never seen before. At the same time, if our economists ask firms about their investment plans, the answer is very sobering. The vast majority prefers to remain in the wait-and-see position. The pandemic has exposed huge investment gaps in infrastructure accumulated over the last decades. The global pandemic certainly provided a jolt of urgency on the health and digitalization front, revealing by necessity what is needed. On the climate front, scientists are unequivocal in their contribution to the 6th report of the UN-led Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It is unfolding here and now, as evidenced by observed changes in weather extremes. Despite the large infrastructure investment gap, private investment in new infrastructure has been falling for the last decade, from about $156 billion in 2010 to about $100 billion in 2019, according to the Global Infrastructure Hub. So, what is needed? Clearly, we cannot replace the private sector with public investments. The opposite is true. This would make no sense in terms of expertise nor in terms of magnitude. Instead, what we need to find ways to channel the available liquidity into promising high-impact projects. And this is where institutions like the ones that are part of G20 LTIC come into play. First, we must join our forces for the establishment of fully compatible regulatory frameworks to build trust and providing clarity to investors and the private sector. Second, we must focus on the most vulnerable and the most affected, a truly just transition within our societies and globally. And we must build and nurture an innovation ecosystem which can increase the societal value of existing and new infrastructure. Progress on achieving the Sustainable Development Goals has been uneven, and the international community is calling on public banks to step up our collective efforts significantly to achieve these goals. And as resources are scarce, every cent invested in infrastructure projects has to unleash impact, not just volumes. The members of the Long-Term Investor Club and their peers and partners have a responsibility and a big opportunity to mobilize private finance and channel these resources to build sustainable societies. We are talking about the largest economic transformation and opportunity of the past 50 years. To fill the finance gap, private finance needs clarity, transparency, good governance, and appropriate incentives. We should recognize the key importance of risk capital to support private sector leadership in innovative energy and digital solutions, in developing the circular economy and ensuring the resilience of investments to current and future climate impacts. And we need to join forces in developing the instruments to address market failures and supporting innovative investment that are economically viable, but do not receive commercial finance due to perceived risks. In order to do so, we should also engage upstream in project cycles, providing the technical support needed to fill a huge knowledge gap, when it comes to such complex and innovative projects, on top of providing models allowing for higher risk-taking based on blended finance. This is why the European Investment Bank, at the European Investment Bank, we are seeking to become an incubator, not just of finance, but also of ideas and expertise. At the IB, we have taken several important steps over the last year. The first is to set an ambitious climate agenda based on a full Paris alignment and the target to support 1 trillion euros of climate investment by the end of the decade. We will put climate in everything we do. Beyond mitigation, we should not forget about the relevance of adaptation and put it center stage, also in the context of infrastructure investment. We will announce a detailed adaptation plan later this year, which will detail specific actions, prioritizations, and initiatives in line with our ambition as the EU Climate Bank. The second is the decision to set up a development branch to increase the impact of our activities outside the European Union. Through a development branch, the EIB will reorganize its global activities and increase its presence on the ground, developing more targeted strategies and services in close cooperation with partners. This step is particularly important as the challenges of the last few years have shown us that Europe, the European Union, must redefine its role in the world and define its ambition in this context. Let me conclude by sharing with you my strong belief that we can accomplish a lot through infrastructure investment if we are ambitious, work together, make use of the right tools, and adopt a can-do approach instead of thinking in doomsday scenarios all the time. Yes, we can. We must ensure that every cent spent on the recovery protects our climate, environment, and improves quality of life. Let's be bold and act now. Be decisive in the fight for climate and environment. I believe that by working together in partnership like this, we have a real chance to make a difference. I invite you all to be open and seek true and deep cooperation. Together, we are much more than the sum of parts. Thank you very much for your attention.